Welcome to the Friday edition of Juan's World. Something of a transitional episode today because I woke in the night because I'd spiked a fever. Now, I don't think I have COVID-19 virus, partly because the fever was not particularly high. Also because it's now gone, and because I don't have any of the other symptoms of COVID-19. But I'm going to follow the protocols as suggested and increase my social distancing. And I'm doing this to protect other people. Like, if I have COVID-19, then it's not going to do me any good to socially distance because I've already got it. What social distancing does is stop the spread of the virus. But this leads me to consider a topic which I have written about, but I don't believe I've talked about on my videos, which is the difference between optimizing and maximizing. And these are strategies that can be pursued by individuals or by cultures. And understanding optimizing and maximizing is really important, particularly in the context of the spread of a virus that is causing a pandemic. We need to optimize. If we maximize, we lose. So let me explain those two categories. One of the ways I used to explain optimizing and maximizing to my students in anthropology class was to imagine that you're driving along a highway that has, let's say, 3 lanes in either direction, and you're moving along fairly fast, but up ahead, one of the lanes is closed, and there is a sign to that effect. Now, if there's almost no traffic, it doesn't matter. If the lane's closed, everything can get by just fine. But if there's really heavy traffic, there's a problem. And you all know the problem if you've driven, particularly in Britain or the United States, and that is that everybody wants to get ahead. Nobody wants to be stuck. And so they're going to do a lot of things, including speeding up, getting into the lane that is supposedly closing, because people are shifting over into the other lanes, and so that lane that is supposedly closing is now emptier than it was before, and shooting ahead as far as they can, quickly as they can, and if they could possibly get to the point of closure so that they can then scoot in and get away with it and on their way. Now, I call this maximizing. That is, people are trying to get ahead at the cost to other people. Because when they scoot ahead in that free lane that is closing and then get to the end point, what they're doing is they're slowing everybody else down. They're cutting a line, and they're causing that line to get slower and slower. And so they are benefiting, they are maximizing at the expense of others. And they don't care. And others may just accept it, or they may try various strategies to stop it from happening, because if the traffic did something else, if the traffic were controlled by computer, so that all the cars were no longer under individual control, but under control of a centralized algorithm, when the closed lane signage appeared, all the traffic would slow and would make a certain amount of distance between each cars and the lanes that are going to stay open, so that the lane that is closing has traffic that can merge with the others, and then everybody can proceed through. Now, everybody's going to be slowed, but they're all going to be slowed equally. And they're all going to be inconvenienced, but they're all going to be inconvenienced equally. In the maximizing situation, there are some people who are going to get great benefit at the expense of a whole bunch of other people who are going to be slowed down considerably. Now think about an analogy. Think about a hose that is pouring water through it at a constant rate, at a fairly good speed. And imagine you take that hose and you just crimp it a little bit, just like eliminating one lane of traffic. What happens at the end of the hose? The water still keeps coming out, but just not as fast. It's a smaller stream, but it's still coming out. That's the optimizing situation. That's what happens to traffic if it was controlled by a computer algorithm. But what happens, imagine you're squeezing the hose and the water at the end is just like a trickle, then you wonder what's going on. That is, in fact, the maximizing situation. Those few drops that are coming out are the ones that have managed to get through by getting ahead of everybody else. And everybody else has been slowed almost to a standstill. Now, here's my question. Do we want to be optimizers, or do we want to be maximizers? Now, no, this analysis that I'm going to give you is a bit too simplistic. It works on a very general level. As I'm going to suggest that if we consider the right wing in politics and the left wing in politics, then we have a divide that is roughly equivalent to maximizing and optimizing. Now, say it's simplistic because right wing and left wing are abstractions that obscure complexities, and there are extremes. There are ultra right wing, ultra left wing, there are moderates, there are centrists, and who knows what. Let's just take that dichotomy at face value for the moment. And what I might suggest is that the right wing tends towards maximizing, and the left wing tends towards optimizing. Now, maximizing is a system in which individuals are pitted one against another, and the victor gets the spoils. And the degree to which a culture is maximizing, that is right wing, is determined by how many constraints the government wants to place on individual greed. And historically, that varies from culture to culture and from era to era. And right now, the United States and the United Kingdom seem to be caught up in a death spiral, as far as I can tell, of increasingly right-wing maximizing. That is, increasingly giving more and more and more to the people who are already on top, the individuals who have maximized, to reduce the constraints on them so that they get more and more and more. And the trouble with that is that the more they get, then the more impoverished the rest of the country becomes. The propaganda is, oh, well, if we make the rich richer, they'll make everybody else richer. I don't quite see how that's going to happen. I don't quite see how giving an extra billion or two to an industrialist or to a corporation is going to increase the wages of the bottom workers. Doesn't strike me as likely, but that's the propaganda. On the other side of the coin, the left wing, the principle of optimization is in force. That is, that you take from everybody, not necessarily equally, but you take a certain amount from everybody so that everybody can get along, so that everybody has what they need. So again, with the lane closure, everybody's slowed down a little bit, but everybody gets through, everybody gets home. They don't all get jammed up in a bottleneck because some maximizer has jammed up all of the traffic. They all suffer equally, or they all pay equally, if you want to put it that way, but they all get through. And so nationalized health systems are of that order, as are nationalized roads, hospitals, police, fire departments. In the 19th century and earlier, all of those social amenities were paid for by individuals. Toll roads were the norm in Britain in the 19th century and earlier. So if you used the road, you paid for it. And there are, of course, toll roads in the United States to this day. But in most modern developed countries, people pay taxes, and the taxes pay for the construction and the maintenance of the roads. That's an optimizing situation. And you pay for that road even if you don't have a car, because you've still got to get somewhere. You've got to take a bus. And even if you're a recluse, you have to go and buy meat and vegetables, and those meat and vegetables have to be transported to the store somehow, by road possibly, or by a rail system, which can also be nationalized, and so on. So the constant push and pull ideologically is between maximizing and optimizing. And even countries that are pretty severely right-wing, as the United States is right now, and as the United Kingdom is becoming, and other European countries, they still have socialized components. So the United States is endlessly battling over whether it should have socialized medicine. And the maximizers, who include the people who might benefit, say, no, we don't want that. We want to save money and pay for ourselves, and if I don't have to go to the hospital, then I don't have to pay for somebody else to go to the hospital. I'm not willing to pay for somebody else to go to the hospital or to see a doctor if I'm healthy. If I keep myself healthy and if I save my money, then I want to keep my money to use the way I want it. Whereas other people think, well, I don't know, you toss the dice. Just like with COVID-19. You toss the dice and you get it. So do you, because you get it, lose and have to pay a lot of money to save your life? Or do you have a system of taxation whereby everybody's paid in and the few who get sick get taken care of? Now, here's where the optimizing issue really comes to the fore and goes back to what I started off with, social distancing. We practice social distancing in a time of pandemic, not to help ourselves, but to help the whole community. It's a socialized system. And it reminds me, I was talking the other day to my sister about face masks. And we both know that face masks don't really do much to help ward off a virus. But that's not the point. And in Asia for long periods of time, particularly in Japan and China, less so in Southeast Asia, but in Japan and China, people have been wearing face masks all the time. And when you look at it on the surface, you might think, oh, they're really worried about getting germs from other people. Well, that's not really the point. I wear a face mask here in Cambodia when I'm riding my bicycle, not because I'm afraid of germs, but because there's a whole lot of pollution and dust and other things in the air that I don't want getting into my lungs. That's point number one. And that's certainly why people in the north of China wear face masks. The pollution is dreadful there. The second reason is to avoid spreading the germs that you have. You're not trying to get protection from other people's germs. It's a social benefit. It's optimizing. You're saying, I might be sick, potentially. I don't want other people getting what I have. And in a way, you can see how obvious it is when you just imagine what an operating room looks like. All the nurses and the surgeons all have masks on because they don't want to have anything deleterious from their bodies getting into the surgical field. They're not protecting themselves from the patient. If they're, let's say, removing the appendix of a patient, they're not thinking, oh, there's so many germs in the appendix, it's going to get into my lungs if I'm not wearing a mask. Of course not. They're saying, if I've got anything bad in my system, I don't want it getting into the patient's wound whilst I've got him or her cut open. So I've got a face mask on. The face mask is protecting others. It's not protecting me. I don't know what it's going to take to make people understand that, or what it's going to take to make people understand that optimizing is the best policy. Now, obviously, it's a point of view. Are you an optimizer or a maximizer? If you're at the top of the heap, then being a maximizer stands to reason. And sometimes if you're at the bottom of the heap, you can be a maximizer if you think, well, if I play my cards right, I'll get to the top. But here's the problem with maximizing, is that it's a selective system. In a maximizing system, only a very few will get to the top. And you are betting that you're going to be one of them. Optimizing is kind of the reverse. It's like betting that you're going to be at the bottom, and that if you play your cards right, that being at the bottom won't be too bad. You know, optimizing is a kind of social insurance system. It's like, doesn't matter where I end up in the system, I'll be all right. Now, to conclude this, I then have to say that whether you're optimizing or maximizing as your worldview is going to depend an awful lot on what you think the good life is. If you think the good life is having billions at your disposal and being able to do exactly what you want, when you want, where you want, how you want, then you're going to work towards maximizing. If you think that the good life involves more than those kinds of physical benefits, that you need enough, food and shelter and all of those things for basic comfort, but that you don't need vast amounts of wealth in order to be happy, then you're probably more likely to be an optimizer. So I'm going to continue this next week, might even continue it for a couple of weeks, and perhaps fold it in with plague, virus, and other issues that are current. But for now, if you like this video, then subscribe, tell your friends, and I'll be back with another recipe on Tuesday.